Hello and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me this evening. I see the usual guys are here. The gang is here, so thanks again for joining me. Much appreciate the support. And I'm here, of course, with the one and only Thunderous One from the UK. Thunderous, how are you doing?
Hi, everybody, and hi to yourself as well, Lloyd. It's been a little while since the last time we engaged in any conversation about what's going on in the world and the world of Islam as well.
Yeah, and the UK. You know, Sergeant Grinch is just saying, isn't it amazing that the German royal family has ceded its power to commies? It's interesting though that royal families. It wasn't uncommon for royal families to mix. So they would form alliances. They would form sort of agreements so that you'd have the Norwegians marrying the Poles, you'd have the Danes marrying the French. I mean, I'm not saying they literally did, because that example particularly may not have happened, but this kind of relationships, that was pretty normal. But yeah, but I think that I've read and I've listened to several discussions from cultural commentators in the UK, from Rafe Hadel-Manku and various others in New Culture Forum, that King Charles is viewed as a very large disappointment because he seems to be the king of Islam rather than the king of England and the protector of the Christian faith. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
I think that though Prince Charles, or King Charles rather, has that appearance now in the public, but one has to bear in mind his mother apostatized and blasphemed every biblical law that she swore to uphold when she was coronated, I think in 1953. She was supposed to be the defender of the faith. It was under her rulership, as it were, that she became from defender of the faith to the defender of faiths. So the title that King Charles has inherited is actually one that's been passed down to him from his mother. She was the original defender of faiths. So, but Prince Charles has always had a checkered history anyway, interfering in politics, interfering in the climate change dialogue that's going on. He was known to be someone that spoke to plants many years ago. So Prince Charles in himself does have a checkered history. But in this instance, with him allowing Islam to metastasize in the UK, I think that really was probably initiated under his, because he's only been king for the past couple of years. His mother's not long been deceased. Islam has been metastasizing within the UK a lot earlier than his reign. So I think some of the things that we're seeing today are not directly responsible to the king, but he hasn't helped situations with his proactive attitude towards Islam.
Don't you see an attitude of appeasement? This is reminiscent of pre-World War II under Chamberlain.
We've discussed this many times, and we've both come to agree that the difference between any other ideology, whether it be secular or theistic, Islam stands separate, because if you challenge the narrative with Islam, your blood will be spilt. Hence why there's a lot of appeasement.
Frightening. Even Rachel Reeves, your chancellor, who's now gone from a 20 billion pound black hole to a 50 billion pound black hole, even she was seen recently at a Pakistani civic association meeting, covered up, and everyone's going like, hold on, we're the dominant culture. Why are we kowtowing to these people? They should be respectful of our culture. Because a lot of people are very disappointed. There seems to be this ceding of authority, of cultural authority to foreigners.
That's because it's block party vote system. That's the reason for the appeasement. And I think that there may well be a genuine fear within politics of sectarian separatism within the UK, where Islam will start. You covered this a couple of years ago, if you recall, about Islam wanting to start its own Islamic party in the United Kingdom. What we're seeing now is what you said a couple of years ago. We're actually now seeing it come alive and being manifest within the political spectrum of UK politics, where Islam is now separating itself and forming its own Islamic parties. We've had several YouTube footages of various Muslims making these kind of claims of having our own party for our own community that specialize in politics for our own religious reasons.
Right. I want to share something since I've got you here, because there's a few. So, hello, everyone. We've got a bunch of articles that Thunderous has sent me that I think we just want to comment on just bring your attention to. And I think the UK needs all our support. The UK is in a pickle. Although the public does seem to be waking up, there seems to be a strong pushback, but we still need to we still need to perhaps just talk about these issues while we can. As you know, free speech is very much under attack. They want to ban VPNs after they started to protect children against online child porn, as if there were no laws against child porn already, or there were no laws against children accessing porn, and as if children don't have parents to fulfill this function. But now they had to create a whole new set of laws that suddenly are banning people from listening to speeches in parliament that they don't like, or from seeing ads of thin girls when fat transgenders are obese, unhealthy, overweight people is apparently fine. So we've got all of these issues going on. I just want to show something, Thunderous, that this is, let me just bring that up. This is Liam Tufts, and he put out a quote. I don't have the quote in front of me right now, but David Wood even responded to it. He was saying that, look, he's an atheist, and, however, he thinks that the UK needs to find its way back to Christianity, because what is now replacing Christian morality and Christian behavior is Islam. And he says, and this is destructive, and it is causing massive issues within the UK. My comment here is that people like himself, Richard Dawkins and others, Richard Dawkins was a militant atheist. They chose to deliberately drive Christianity out of the public sphere. They drove it out of schools, they drove it out of government, they drove it out of the legal system, and into that vacuum stepped Islam. So they are actually also to blame for this, that they are part of the problem. What are your thoughts?
Lloyd, if you recall, several years ago, you and I, with Reason, Thaddeus, and also I forget what the other gentleman's name is. We did a show about atheism on a New Year's Eve, and that was the byproduct of our private discussions that we've been having about atheism as being the real elephant in the room that no one's been taking any notice of, that has created the vacuum that has allowed all the LGBTQI drag maps and all the other social problems that we're found in this country as being the real target. And it's been going on for generations now within this country. You're right. Atheism has created this vacuum. It has marked, it has derided, it has belittled, it has undermined objective theistic moral values that were held in the United Kingdom. For those of a particular generation, you may remember phrases like living in sin, or a child born out of wedlock was a bastard, or an illegitimate, or you might find things like a shotgun wedding, meaning that if you got a girl pregnant outside of wedlock, the father will force you to marry the boy to be responsible for your actions. Now we're living in a society where, a woman can have 2-3 children by 2-3 different men. This is a direct product of Darwin atheism. You've undermined the education system by teaching atheism scientifically, by claiming that Darwinian evolution is true or possible, and then you, on top of that, when they left school, when they go into the university or the college and university further education systems, you further at it with the atheistic argument of evil. So it creates within a mindset of people this anti-God disposition or presupposition, which then creates a void of, well, it's not a case of objective theistic moral values. You've now replaced it with subjective feelings. It's what you feel like doing. It's what you feel is your own truth. Everybody has their own truth now. Truth is now relative. It's not absolute. This is what has happened. So the situation in the United Kingdom with Islam and its manifestation through force and the demonstration of power is a direct byproduct of Darwin atheism. Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, all these people and others are directly responsible for the secular America, secular Europe, and Australia as well, that are now under in a chokehold, so to speak, with Islam.
Right. No, thank you for that. Someone, HM Fogg says, if anyone has enough personal security to ensure that their blood will not be shed for speaking against Islam, then surely it's royalty. But it seems that royalty has followed the current, shall we say, government position of community cohesion, anything to prevent an uprising. but it's almost as if they are doing their best to tiptoe around without stepping on the landmines that they know that they allowed to be planted or planted themselves. It's a crazy situation. It's like community cohesion, not speaking up, not, shall we say, inciting a or causing the public to become so inflamed that a civil war erupts, as Dr. David Betts is now warning. For the last 10 years, he says he's been telling the government this is coming and it's coming very soon. If the signs are there, and now he's saying it's imminent. What are your thoughts on that?
The very people that make these kind of comments about multiculturalism and diversity are the ones that are very far removed from the reality. They don't live at the bottom end of the totem pole. They don't live in the reality of the terra firma that we all existed, which is just normal people going about our business of working for a living, struggling to earn a living in order to pay for the cost of life as it is at the moment. These people are very far removed and not exposed to the dangers that this kind of immigration or ideology puts within the community, which we'll probably go on and discuss later on. So it's easy for these kind of people to, it's very much like the phrase, a hard day's work never hurt anybody. But it often comes from the mouth of somebody who's never done a hard day's work. That's where we are with these kind of people in their comments.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Philip asked about what's the status of the royals, and David says here, the king's a globalist and a traitor to his people. He's Christian in name only, and the Church of England is a heretical institution subverted by Marxist liberation theology. And I mean, I don't think he's really wrong here, because the king does seem to have, shall we say, what's the word? The English word penchant. Is that a French word for having Muslim ceremonies in Westminster Cathedral, for speaking favorably about Islam and forgetting to discuss things like Easter, but definitely he's there for Eid. And, he's there definitely doing press ups with the Muslims and not quite there for Christmas, because you don't really hear him say very much. And people are questioning his loyalties, and people are very disappointed. And in fact, I have seen conservative commentators say maybe the age of the royals is ending because these people are now not fulfilling their role.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the royal family themselves have their own issues, as it were. You had Sarah Ferguson that had an affair with a Texan millionaire or billionaire, as he was at the time. Diana, obviously, her death has brought in many sort of like accusations of conspiracy. Prince Charles is alleged to have had an affair with his current wife for many years, even during the time of his marriage with Diana. Prince Andrew, I think nothing needs to be said more than that. And there are many associations with known child traffickers, Prince Andrew with Epstein, and obviously Charles with Jimmy Savile. So it's a family that has a very dark, spurious history. And I think people are wise to that, and their appeal is now beginning to wane, and then maybe they sense that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Prince Harry with Meghan Markle, the Megans, I think that's been a huge disappointment. And people felt that someone should have spoken up, and even the Queen perhaps should have said something, or the King should have made a public statement I don't know. Well, people are very disappointed, and I think that really fractured the royals and their image. Thunderous, you there?
Sorry, yeah. So, what was that a question? Sorry, sorry.
Yeah, just a comment. No, I mean the whole thing with Harry and Meghan, and I think that seems to have really impacted them negatively.
Yeah, I think they try to brand themselves as some kind of American chat show or live TV. I don't know whatever these productions are, and it hasn't quite worked that well. The PR has failed dramatically in that, and also the books that he's been writing with reference to his role within the royal family haven't helped. If anything, if anybody had a negative view of the royal family, I think if anything, Meghan Markle and Harry have kind of solidified their worldview of how arcane the royal family really is and how irrelevant having such a role in society is now.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because Prince Charles speaks of, all faiths, as you said, as opposed to, look, we're a Christian country. He's not standing up for the British people. He seems to be more interested in outsiders, and I think people are feeling betrayed.
The thing is, when you have a title, Defender of Faiths, meaning all faiths, so where does King Charles stands with, say, the death of Jesus, one book and secular history testifies to the fact that Jesus did live and Jesus did die. Whereas you've got a book that comes 600 years later that makes the claim that Jesus didn't die. So which faith does he defend on that
Well,
contradiction?
John 1:1 says that he is Antichrist who says that Jesus Christ was not, that God was not born in the flesh, and that he is not the Son of God, which Islam fails this test. Islam makes the claim that Jesus Christ was not born the Son of God, was not the Son of God, that there is no Trinity.
Yeah.
Islam is, in that sense, truly Antichrist. Why does the head of the Church of England not speak out and say, well, look, we're respectful of people, but we cannot support this ideology? He doesn't seem to be standing for the faith, and that's disappointing.
Yeah, I think, is it even a discussion anymore to claim that the royal family are Christian anymore? Is it just a thin veneer of Christianity upholding a tradition as far as PR is concerned, when in reality all their actions and attitudes and behaviors and comments belie the statement? So what one that should really be questioned, at what point are they actually Christian, rather than question at what point are they not Christian?
Actually, Sergeant Grinch makes a good point. King Charles fractured the royal family by cheating on Diana. Actually, yeah, that was the wound that really destroyed the public image, if you think about that. But then, of course, she also was eventually with a Muslim.
Yeah, but she was seen as a brood. I think she caught the public's imagination, but the reality was they just needed something with royal blood so that she could be a brood mare in order for Prince Charles to breed, because Camilla wasn't seen as virtuous enough to bear children that will be the next in line for the monarchy. I think that's the reality that took place there. So there was no real loving relationship between the two. But one has to bear in mind, even though Charles was known to have continued his relationship with Camilla, allegedly, during the marriage with Diana, one has to bear in mind that even Diana herself had several affairs, and one of them, Barry Manicky,
possibly with her bodyguard as well.
Yeah, that was Major James Hewitt was another one, but Barry Manicky was the one that was driving the motorbike and found that he got garroted by traveling down the road. Yeah, if people do the research, Barry Manicky is his name, and during a motorcycle drive, he was more or less beheaded. There was somebody had put something across the road so that as his motorbike went over, driving down the road, it was in line with his head, so it basically killed him.
Wow.
Yeah, so Barry Manicky.
Crazy stuff. So, but
and
yeah,
then
looks
obviously,
like
then obviously you've got this spurious circumstance of what happened in Paris with Diana and Dodi.
Say again, the spurious that happened with Diana and
The spurious circumstance of Diana's
death.
accident in Paris with Dodi, which incidentally she said that was going to happen, that she suspected that she will die in a car crash. But that's another subject for another time.
Right. Yeah. No, excellent. Thanks for the commentary, man. Also, this is a picture of Muslims blocking a street when they have mosques and houses and fields and things they can go pray in. But this obviously is a sign of political dominance. This is a very recent tweet from David Atherton. I think it's recent, a couple of days. I could be wrong. 10th of August, that would be today. And he says, a reminder, this is from a journalist, that UK Muslims are 6.5% of our population, but are responsible for 97% of terror deaths since 2000. They are 90% on MI5's terror watch list. I thought the far right was the problem, those grannies saying, protect our kids. So there are 75% of terror threats. There are 84% of child gang rapes. There are 18% of prisoners in prison. There are 6,000 FGMs a year. They have a 1.5 times birth defect rate. In fact, Pakistanis are 3% of the UK population, but they are 33% of the healthcare for defective births. Think about that. 33% of UK medical resources goes to Pakistanis because of this issue. There are 48.6% of 16 to 64 not employed, and 27% of them are in social housing. Well, there are 27% of all social housing, which means that native Brits are being denied services because these foreigners who refuse to work, who won't work, who go on welfare, are taking up those resources. And he says, why do we tolerate this abuse?
Well, and the thing is, this is only going to increase because when you're looking at the immigration flux that's coming into the United Kingdom, they're all coming from the Islamic ideology. So those are the figures that we have today. Next year, they'll increase. And what's not on that list, there are things like honor killings, not on the list. There's also forced marriages, not on the list. Then there's the deaths for apostasy or the threats of apostasy, child kidnapping for taking their children under the guise of seeing the family, but they're actually forcing their children to get married to a stranger abroad for the sake of that person getting a green ticket, as it were, to come in to live inside the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So there are other things we can add to this list.
I mean, people are not fully aware of chain migration, whereas when one person comes over, he establishes a beachhead and then
Yeah.
he brings over 7 to 12 of his relatives. So for every million people you bring in, that's effectively 12 million people, 7 to 12 million people shortly down the line. Like they claim that they brought in 21,000 Afghans or whatever it was, but those Afghans brought in 10 to 14 family members each.
I think if you look at that list, you could also see sometime in the future where you can put in things like tax fraud or maybe insurance fraud or maybe drug dealing, the percentages that involve the Islamic community where they're involved in certain criminal activity, what percentages of that criminal activity are by the religion of peace.
Yeah, I think significant portion. Grinch says that the IQ level of the population is decreasing, and this is a known phenomenon. This has been noticed across the West, and that much is true. Here's a question from Joel Thomas. Does the common person in the UK now realize that Islam is a cancer?
Is that to me or is that to both of
Hey, that
us?
was to you. Yeah, that's to you.
Okay, yeah, I think the common person in the UK does realise that Islam is a cancer. I think what's happened is that the powers that be, so to speak, have created an environment where the way I would put it, if for anybody that's ever seen the movie Trainspotting, there's a scene where Renton comes out comes out of the court and he says, "Here I am surrounded by my family and friends. I've never been so alone in my whole life." I think what we have in this country now is a fear of speaking, a fear of opinion, a fear of actually expressing ourselves, which is, if you go back, which is something that atheism is responsible for, because atheism created the fear of having an opinion. Now, if you go back in this country, you would have certain phrases that go along with the ones that I've already mentioned. For instance, he wears his heart on his sleeve, or you know where you stand with it, or he will tell you as it is, a spade's a spade. So we had certain phrases within the lexicon of our culture. Those phrases are not used anymore because people don't speak with an opinion anymore. Also, in the United Kingdom, as a 57-year-old man that grew up as a child through the 70s, but as a teen in the 80s and the 90s, the media TV system, for instance, BBC, ITV, and Channel 4, would regularly have debate programs. And they were, in a sense, quite real debate programs. Where you had two opposing views, and the audience would, whether at home or actually in the studio, would then formulate an opinion on two opposing arguments. Okay, you don't find, so there was an intellectual mental exercise taking place. You don't have that anymore now. What you have now is, if you have an opinion against this Islam, you're an Islamophobe. If you have an opinion against immigration, you're far right. So, and this goes back earlier than what's happening today. This, in my estimation, started when you had certain phrases like homophobia and transphobia. That's when these conversations stopping, critical comments were made. So people are waking up. The problem is, I think people have a fear factor of actually speaking what they feel and what they think. And because of the internet and the access to information, for instance, with reference to Islam and the Quran and Hadith, people are able to do a lot more of their own research, read directly from the sources, listen to scholars, Muslim scholars, to see if they can reconcile the obscenities that we read in the Quran and Hadith, and now more wise to it. But yet again, I think there's a strong fear factor with saying something about it. And the fear factor is real because you can say anything you want about atheism, Christianity, Hinduism, and any other ideology, and you can do it with immunity, impunity, and safety because it will be an intellectual discussion. With Islam, it's predicated on emotion. You say anything about Islam, you're likely to get your throat cut.
You know, I just want to bring up something here. Hold on, I just gotta. Um, you know, Thunderous, you're on fire today, but I want to bring up something. I want to show people. These are a couple of articles Thunderous sent me recently, and I think we'll have an opportunity to just go through a few headlines that he raised. I've got two here. On this one, I did a brief summary. It's like just a very tiny summary. This is an article from National Library of Medicine on inbreeding, and it says inbreeding is associated with a decline in intelligence. I think the average IQ in Pakistan is estimated to be somewhere around 70. Whereas in the West, you're looking at an average of about 100, 103. And this also says an increased risk of mental retardation due to the higher likelihood of inheriting rare recessive genes that impair cognitive function. This one involves 408 children. And it says there are significant IQ reductions, a full-scale IQ drop of 25 points. And this was another article. I haven't gone through this, but yeah, you're looking at an IQ drop. 70% of all Pakistanis are inbred, and in Turkey, it is 30%, right? There are more stillbirths amongst immigrants. Half of everybody in the Arab world is inbred, and 55% of the Pakistani community in Britain is married to a first cousin. Pakistanis account for 3% of all births in Britain, but 30%, and now it's more than 33% of all British children with genetic disorders and a higher rate of infant mortality. Just as a simple little point. So this is putting strain on the medical services. These people are unemployable. They are unable to pass university. So it says here that if your parents are cousins, intelligence goes down 10 to 16 points, and they're at risk of having an IQ lower than 70 if you have children from cousin marriages. Now, because this is a generational issue, it is the case of an IQ lower than 70 because these are generationally the case. Correct, Thunderous?
Yes. I mean, this is it. This is what people need to realize. We're not talking about a community where the family of one cousin is marrying a family of another first cousin. Their parents were likely first cousins, and their grandparents were likely first cousins, and their great-grandparents were likely first cousins. So you're seeing a genealogy of first cousins marrying first cousins, marrying first cousins, marrying first cousins, which gives an exaggerated, if you like, end result of genetic mutation resulting in mental and physical deformities.
Yeah. Welcome, Cascarabias. Yeah, so guys, I've just posted the link to that particular article in the chat. Thank you, Thunders, for sending that over.
Can I just add on that?
Yes.
As well? One has to bear in mind, it was only about 2 or 3 or 4 months ago when first cousin marriages were brought into the Houses of Parliament as a discussion, and one Muslim MP was trying to justify it by saying this is very much a hereditary cultural practice within Islam. He wasn't saying it in the negative as though, yeah, we should do something about it because of the burden that it creates for the country, or even for the individuals that are born with these deformities. But speaking of it in a positive way, because it brings strong family ties and strong community cohesion. So he was more like speaking in a very much a manner of advocating this sort of thing. And also Zakir Naik and people such like who's supposed to be a doctor have gone on in seminars and made the comments when questioned about inbreeding. Well, his response is, well, you can have deformities from people who are not cousins. That's the rationale or rationalization.
Say that again, please.
That you can have deformities or mental problems from people that are not cousins. So almost saying, well, you can have 2 people that are not cousins and they can give birth to a child that has some incapacity, mental or physical, but you can have first cousins that can have a child that's got an incapacity, mental or physical.
Yeah, we're talking about ratios, but Pete, they obviously they play with these statistics. They lie about the ratios. I mean, this is also ideological capture of Islam, because you have doctors telling you that, yes, a man with a winky is a woman and they can fall pregnant. By the same token, people are ideologically bound to follow the tenets of Islam over the facts of science.
Yeah, you and I know the rationale, but then that's because we've gone through the mental process of working these things out just as much as the audience that listen to you, Lloyd. But we're talking about Islam, and Islam has a principle of don't think. We'll do the thinking for you.
Yeah, Protestant believer says Islam is wearing out its welcome in the universe, and I genuinely think if you, and I'll get to this discussion with Thunderous as we go, but I do feel, I'm feeling a return of the, shall we say, the warrior energy amongst Western men that governments and others have tried to wean out. I sense that it's returning. People are tired. Now, there are negatives here as well, which I'll touch on later, but I do feel a return of the Christian warrior ethic is starting to return, and Muslims are only pushing for another crusade. That's what I think they're going to. Instead of capitulation, I think they're going to meet with and cause another crusade. H.M. Fogg says the popularity of someone like Lubna, who insists that Islam itself is not a problem, but there are bad apples in every community, makes me question that people understand the issue. I'm going to guess here that she does understand the issue. She's lying to herself and lying to you. Or she's just lying to you in that these people may well be just running interference. Either they are vastly ignorant, more so than the audience that is here today, because I believe the audience here today probably can run rings around her in discussing Islam. I think Thunderous can. I think you guys would expect that I can. And she is simply there. You know, there's someone that I'm planning to bring on the channel, but it's really difficult, with the exception of my good friend Thunderous here. You know, it is really hard to arrange, and of course with Usama Dakdok, it's really difficult to arrange guests. It's actually very, very awkward, believe it or not. But someone I'm planning to bring on, he's a Muslim, ex-Muslim. He left Islam and he has to hide his identity for his own safety because Islam is a religion of peace, as you all know. And he says to me, Lloyd, there are no peaceful Muslims. If you call yourself a Muslim, then you support the ideology. And the peaceful Muslims are the grass that the snakes, the jihadis, hide in. He says that's all it is. And she's simply the grass that they hide.
I think with someone like Lubna, and I've listened to Lubna from time to time, every now and again, till I get to the point of being bored to sobs, is that if she really believes that is the case, then that would be the subtle comment I'd expect from a woman whose own prophet says that she's only got 50% the intelligence of a man. So she's merely proving her prophet true by making such comments, because the comment is stupid, but then women are stupid as far as Islam is concerned. So there you go.
Yeah. Adam Price is Deus Vult. No, I genuinely think, look, I'll tell you a couple of things. Thunderous, I'll give you a thought, and I'd just like to get your comments and feedback. A few weeks ago, so look, a new conservative president selected in Poland, and as you all might know, I live in Poland. I live in the vicinity of Warsaw. I used to live in the city, and I've been here for a while. I'm learning the language. I have a job. I contribute. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I pay the rent. But I think it's not unfair to say that 99.8% of all Black migrants give the rest a bad name. I don't think that's a mistake to say that. So what's happening is that you can feel there's a shift in the psyche. There's a shift in people's attitudes. Poland doesn't have an immigration problem from Europe and from Africa and the Middle East, but they see what's happening in Germany. There were 3 weeks ago, there were 80 different marches in 80 different cities to protest mass immigration in a country that doesn't have it, right? And of course, soccer fans went to the border with Germany because the German police were kicking African migrants into Poland. And the migrants were, of course, causing issues. And the Polish soccer fans, who, as you may know from years past, were not the friendliest people, they went and protested on the border. They set up blocks and they prevented these people from coming, and the government was forced to respond before things got out of hand. And so now the government is starting to close the German border and prevent this immigration. They're taking it seriously. And a few weeks ago, I was outside. I was going to work with a friend of mine. He came to pick me up. It was about 6 o'clock, something to 7 in the morning. And 2 young men, now they didn't look like Poles. They looked Georgian, maybe Azerbaijani, who knows. They were never seen them before, came walking down the street, and they stopped a few meters from me and just stood there looking at me. I noticed them. I didn't respond. I didn't let them know, but they were just looking at me. And I can tell you from having worked in security, my, let's say my spider sense was tingling. I pretended that I wasn't noticing, and I'm getting ready, and I'm ready to to do the deed and so on as necessary. But I was trying to just play dumb and waiting for them to come over because it looked like they were going to. And my friend comes and he stops. I get in the car and he says, "Dude, watch for those two guys. They look like they're going to attack you." So the point of that story is to say that there's a vibe change I can feel in Poland. This is not a slight on Polish people, but understand there's a concern, and I can understand where the concern comes from. But also, another problem that I'm also seeing on social media is people are not even Poles, actually people from outside of Poland are going, "You don't belong in Poland," and I'm like, "I'm married, I am law-abiding, I contribute, I work in a professional capacity, I I don't commit any crimes, and where is the problem?" And they say, "You're brown, get out." Quite bluntly, this is what I've been told recently by people who aren't even Polish. I don't belong here. And so what's happening is you're getting people who are indiscriminate in their ideology. Let's just say they're a little angry and they're becoming indiscriminate. And this is a negative effect that I'm noticing. Thunderous, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is something that in the United Kingdom, what you're experiencing in Poland, because they can see what's happening within, say, other countries, the infrastructure is being broken down. As human beings, if you go to Genesis 1:26, where God says, "Let us make man in our image," we reflect God's qualities, and one of those is righteousness. So we have a heavy sense of righteous indignation when we see things that shouldn't be happening. It affects us. It affects us emotionally, intellectually, and psychologically, and spiritually. So when people are looking at things happening in other countries, naturally there's a resistance to want to have that happen in their own country. And the byproducts of that, sometimes with human sense of justice, is they may take it a little bit too far. And where I'm going with this is, Islam is creating a problem within the United Kingdom. But some people, and Islam is a predominantly brown-skinned ideology. The problem is in England is that Hindus and Sikhs are brown-skinned too. And people tend to go after Hindus and Sikhs because from their point of view, they just see a bunch of packets, as they would call it, or as they would see it. And that would mean that they're fair game. When in reality, Sikhs and Hindus are insular in their existence within the communities, but they don't cause friction, they don't cause tension, they're not toxic, and they're not corrosive.
Mm-hmm.
But the byproduct of the ideology of Islam is it tends to tars everybody with the same brush. I think that is that what you're saying?
I think so. I mean, just an interesting thought. This is very poorly formed. I haven't thought it through, but I was thinking, we've been told not to discriminate, right? But discrimination is necessary. Is that floor polish or is that milk, right? Think about it. Is that salt or is that sugar? We need to discriminate, which is to make differences, which is to distinguish differences and to isolate things which look the same but are separate and find nuance, right? But we're told not to discriminate. By the same token, now they're not discriminating. They're just going, "Well, you're black."
Right? Just on the, just bringing up a couple of scriptural principles on that. Jesus said, I think it's in Matthew 10:13-14, or it could be 7:13, where Jesus says, "Go out into each city and seek out those deserving." So Jesus is basically giving the dignity of calculating or gauging another human based on your experience. So we have the dignity of gauging another human being. That's not discrimination. That's weighing up a person in that situation as to whether they. And also, the Apostle Paul says, do not become unevenly yoked with unbelievers. For what friendship does Christ have with Belial? Righteousness with darkness, and so on. Then there's another one. Do not become unevenly yoked with unbelievers as well. So there is a measure of responsibility where we may not be judgmental, but that's in the context of a person's heart. But we can gauge situations as to whether they're beneficial for us or not.
Right. Yeah. No. But this is so. Just the audience. There are things are changing. I sense it. I'm not giving you a scientific analysis. I'm just telling you this is what I'm feeling, what I'm sensing. And you can see there's a caution, there's a concern from people because now there's so much bad news coming out of Germany, coming out of France, coming out of the UK of crimes committed by non-white migrants that people are concerned for themselves, their families. And I can see it, where before this wasn't an issue some years ago. Now I can sense, at least in Poland, there seems to be some level of concern, and it's causing people to be less open. So that's just something I'm noticing.
I think what hasn't helped, like, forgive me if I interrupted you there. I think what's happened as well, Lloyd, if anybody's ever seen one of the Naked Gun movies, there's a scene where Leslie Nielsen is basically waving his hands whilst there's a building behind him exploding with lots of things going on, and he's basically waving out saying, "There's nothing to see here. There's nothing to see here. There's nothing going on.
Yes.
Go." And I think the public are in that position now where they can see what's going on behind the scenes. They're not being fooled by the media anymore. They're not being fooled by religious representatives that are claiming absurd things about the ideology. They're not being fooled by the woke ideological left that are making claims of, that this is a peaceful religion and we need to be helping immigrants and so on. So they see through it now. That's the scene, isn't it? And I think that's where the public are now. They're standing in front of Leslie Nielsen while all of that is happening in the background.
Yeah, no, that is, yeah, definitely there are some issues here. I mean, one of the examples, I think something that also the way that news is reported, I think people distrust the media, and people are now forced to make up their own minds, communicate through back channels. I mean, the UK now wants to, there's an interesting law that is being tabled now for the EU. For instance, the UK just passed this Online Safety Act, which supposedly protects children from accessing pornography, although there actually are laws in place already. This law obviously now has been immediately repurposed to silence discussion of migrants, discussion of crime statistics involving migrants, which really just seems to be a ploy to protect the government agenda. But now within the EU, apparently there is a law I was looking at that they're looking to pass, because Poland was in charge of the EU Security Council or something, or digital security for the last 3 years, and they've been holding this back. But now Denmark has taken over, and what they want to do is they want to scan all of your text messages, WhatsApp, Signal, text, you name it, SMS, before you send them, so that before you send the message and it goes to end-to-end encryption, they will be able to scan your messages as you type them before they are sent and encrypted. And this is something they want to make law within the EU. Believe it or not, I mean, apparently that's a regulation they're trying to pass now, so that your phone is going to be, have spying software inside it to read all your messages. This is Big Brother written very large.
Yeah, and it kind of reminded me of a certain Tom Cruise movie where they were preempting crime from the stages of thought. So even while you're thinking of a crime, they will have you arrested for the crime, even though you've not committed it, but for thinking of the crime in the first place. I forget what the movie's name is, but I think we're not too far off with that as much as they can, where they're preempting crimes. If they're going to be monitoring your text messages in real time before you send it, all that will ever do is just isolate people, where people, it may have a backlash effect where people just start socializing again in person and share ideas in person. You can't stop ideas. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. You can't stop. You may be able to restrict it with technology, but you can't stop ideas. What's to say that you can't put something down on a piece of paper and mail it through the usual mail system?
Yeah. I mean, you know what? You can change the software on your phone to use something like Graphene OS or some other OS. De-Googleify your phone completely. You can use third-party Linux on your phone. So there are ways and means, and what they're just going to force people. It's not solving the problem. They're not dealing with the primary issue, which is the crime and the issues caused by immigration. They are dealing with the people who are noticing the problem, because this is going to affect community cohesion, because talking about the problem is going to inflame things, and these cowards don't want that to happen. They simply want to kick the can down the road as long as possible. I mean, it's really cowardice. I don't even have words for it. But instead of fixing the problem, they want to fix the people who are noticing the problem.
Yes, which has always been the case, because it's a threat to the power that they have.
Yeah, no. What is the agenda? The ones pulling the strings want civil unrest. On that point, I mean, if you look at jihad, Islam is a revolutionary religion. By revolutionary means, it's like Marxism. They want revolution. Remember, Marx, socialism requires revolution. It requires you have the thesis, the antithesis or antithesis, and this creates the synthesis or synthesis, right? And the way that you get there is through violent revolution. You destroy the old, and out of the ashes rises the new. That's the idea. So they want to burn everything down because they believe they need to destroy everything and start fresh. That is the Marxist socialist approach, or communist, as you will. Then, of course, Islam is the same. Jihad. You bring warfare, jihad, revolution on those on the Dar al-Harb, what is not already Islamic, the house of war. And then you start fresh with the Islamic idea. Same as Marxism, it's nothing different. But then, of course, if you look at the Luciferian satanic approach, if you look at someone like Aleister Crowley, he has exactly the same idea. If you want something, you have to fight for it and you have to win, and this is how you establish it. And therefore, and this is also the Darwinian idea, that if you want a resource, you have to fight for it because only the fittest survives. And therefore, all of these ideologies, from Darwin to Satanism, Islam, communism / socialism, all have the very same fundamental approach. You destroy, and then from what's left, the victors then rebuild in their own image because they believe they're gods at the end of the day.
Just in my response to Joel Thomas as well. So the question is, what's the agenda? In my estimation, if you look at the biblical narrative and you accept the biblical narrative as a truth, for me personally, I think everything that we're seeing on the world scene at the moment is designed to fracture, splinter society and community as we head towards a centralization on a global scale, a centralization of power. That's where my perception is at, where everything is heading towards a centralization. And a lot of the things that we're seeing in the world today seem, in my estimation, towards that centralization.
Yeah. There's a question from, sorry, I just missed it now. Good grief. There's so many questions. The chat is really active. Actually, this is very interesting. Thor, isn't that the same as what's written on the Baphomet arm synthesis from opposites, Tawhid? Yeah, it's very interesting. If you go back to Plato, Aristotle, you'll find ideas that are socialist. If you go back to the ancient Greek pagans, you're going to find these ideas. These are not new ideas. Even Darwin's ideas, he simply recycled Muslim Sufi poetry, which was a theological idea, not a scientifically proved one. Darwin is merely recycling Islamic ideas, Sufism, which was rendered in poetry. And then, of course, those ideas are also then prefigured earlier in pagan Greek ideas. So they're not scientific. They're simply old pagan ideas just recycled with a new hat. So yeah, there's some very odd things. And then, sorry, I just lost the comment. I'm sorry. I'll try and find it.
While you're just finding that, can I just say to the audience, I'm not using my normal medium of communication with Lloyd on this live chat at the moment, which is my laptop, where the screen is not functioning correctly. I'm having to use my iPad. So if you're asking questions in the chat, sometimes when I'm on the show, I respond to them, I read them out and respond. Today, I'm unable to do that because I can't see the question, so I do apologize.
Yeah. Okay, no, so Joel Thomas says the concept of family itself was established by God. And now that concept has been under attack for decades. I had a conversation with someone a week ago, 2 weeks ago, which was a brilliant point that he made that I had missed in my discussions on logic. And he said, look, you're born into a family. You have a unit. You have a mother and a father. The father is not the mother is not the father. That's your basic law of identity, father and mother. Right? Then you have the law of non-contradiction. Male, not female. Female, not male. Right? The one is not the other. The child is not the mother, and so on. So you see the application of the basic rules of logic and the law of these excluded middle. Right? So you see all of these rules of logic encapsulated within the family, the separation of roles, the definition of a particular identity, and a certain set of tasks that group has, that role fulfills, right? And then you see who fills that role from a biological, social, cultural perspective. And yes, the destruction of the family has led to the ability to impose all sorts of crazy, non-rational, non-logical ideas. Again, I just forgot the name. I could not find the quote because the chat is moving really fast, surprisingly. But thank you. Appreciate the engagement, guys.
And
Oh,
to Joel, I would just like to add, I totally agree with you, and I think atheism is responsible for the destruction of the family unit in the Western world, directly responsible for the
yeah.
destruction of the family.
Wow. Emmanuel says, I have Graphene OS and we have mandatory apps in Germany, like for public transit, and they made it so they could only work with stock Android. That is frightening. That is disturbing. That just shows intent. That's interesting news, Emmanuel. Really, really interesting. By the way, Emmanuel and I will be on, I think, on the 18th. Yes, Monday the 18th, Emmanuel and I will be on. We'll be discussing Germany, and we'll be looking at the Grand Mufti of Palestine / Jerusalem, Muhammad Amin al-Husseini, who was an ally, a loyal ally of the Nazis who volunteered to become a Nazi. So that'll be something to discuss. But there was the question that this remigration. You're in the UK, Thunderous. People are sick and tired. I know they can't say it because they'll be labeled and branded, but people are tired. People want a solution. Are the UK? Oh, is the native population of the UK, the ethnic English, are they unhappy with legal migrants who fit in? Or is this now becoming the point where the pendulum is swinging hard the other way and people are just, look, get them all out? I mean,
I think it's got to the point where it's pretty much all of them, legal and illegal. I think one of the things with the legal aspect is when you say legal migrants, are you talking about people that have come over with education certificates in nursing, and then they get a job on the NHS and deliberately work a night shift because it's an easier shift, and then after a few months later they can invite 7 members of their family over? Are you talking about those legal migrants? Because the public are pretty much fed up with them as well.
well, I mean, if you bring one person over, fine and well, he comes over as a student at 18. He's never going to leave. He has no intention of leaving. He quits his studies. He opens up I don't know, a little fruit stall, and then he brings over 15 family members, and they are going to bring over 2 family members each. And then suddenly you have 40 people, right? So people are realizing that. And also look at this new one in, one out plan with France that the UK has. The issue is that if you remove one and take one, the problem is the other guys that are still here, eventually chain migration happens. And then on top of that, apparently there's this whole one in, one out deal isn't complete. Apparently there's some arrangement where they still have to accept more refugees or migrants, quote unquote refugees from France. So the numbers are not going to go down. The numbers are actually going to increase. So how are people feeling about this? I mean,
they see it as a gimmick, Lloyd. This one in, one out is a gimmick, and I think anybody with even like inbred intelligence can work out that the one in, one out is a gimmick. It's not so much those things that are the issue, in my estimation. I think when you're looking at protests, there was recently one in Epping over the 4-star hotel where migrants were put inside, plush rooms, 3 meals a day. But the police lied because they had actually chaperoned a counter protest that was
yes,
in favor of immigrants. So it's not so much now just the situation with illegal migrants. The police are now chaperoning in the protesters as a counter protest to those who have got concerns with uncontrolled migration. So the police are involved, the governments are involved, the media are involved. So the only people now that seem to be reactive with any kind of sense and decency are people who have a natural aversion or concern about illegal migration, and they're having to fight the police, they're having to fight counter protesters, they're having to fight the media, and they're having to fight the judicial system and the political system.
I
That's
think
all
they're
in
slowly
favor.
winning. I mean, in Epping, at that protest at the migrant hotel, where these migrants were allegedly committing, shall we say, crimes against young girls, the police dismissed the claims that they bust anti-racist to Epping Asylum Hotel protest. A couple of days later, they had to retract that as false because it was proven on video that they actually literally brought these people in. These were not locals. These were people from miles, tens of miles away, came there to demonstrate against the grandmothers, the mothers, the parents whose children were harassed. And so you have outsiders protesting against people with a legitimate issue. And I mean, if your voice is being suppressed like that, and the police are partial, have taken a side, are supporting these far left protesters, and clearly have no interest in supporting the locals. I mean, they were filmed putting them in the buses and taking them out. The UK is the powder keg if this happens. I think the only thing.
The thing is as well, it's not just this situation here. One has to bear in mind as well, living in England, the epidemic of shoplifting with impunity, and the law is not doing anything. We had a situation 3 days ago in this country where a shop owner had put in his window, after repeatedly being a victim of shoplifting, shoplifters are scumbags. The police went and had to have a word with him to remove the sign, because shoplifters were obviously had their feelings hurt by being called scumbags. But
yes.
So that doesn't endear the public to the police anymore, So then you have, if you go back to last year with the Southport riots and people being arrested for making comments, a mother making comments and then repeating the comments several hours later, only to be arrested and put inside prison. So there's a lot of things that are taking place within the United Kingdom today that all seem to be directly attacking the people at the bottom end of the totem pole. The people at the bottom of the totem pole are the victims in many areas of what is taking place today. There is no one in the media, in the judicial system, that are speaking out for the victims or the people of grave concerns based on reality. These are not wild racist claims. This is a culture where its own prophet, at the age of 52, married a 6-year-old girl, and then had sexual intimacy when she was only 9 years old and he was 54. If that's your role model, and you're coming from a world where women are held in such low esteem, if you're coming from Afghanistan, houses don't have windows, they have to be bricked up. I think one of the latest comments I heard recently is that even the hijab, where they got the slit for the eyes, even that has been reduced to 50%, so they can only see out with one eye now. Wow. If you're coming from an ideology that has this view of women, and you're coming into United Kingdom, how is that? What's the reaction going to be? What are you exactly expecting? And it's not. And these people that were bussed in, I would challenge, how many of them were actually paid to protest? Are they paid protesters? And the other ones, because there was one woman that was interviewed with glasses and curly hair, and I just thought to myself,
I remember that.
I thought that you probably live nowhere near a migrant hotel. Your social circle are probably champagne, kale eat.
Actually, her social media is her exclusively with other fellow white Brits.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
sorry.
So no. I was just going to say, this is one of those rare situations as well, which I find remarkable, which for me is a demonstration as to how severe the problem is. That we're living in a world today as well where there seems to be a lot of prejudice towards white people from the black community, or that's how it's being portrayed in the media.
However, this is also true. No, this is true. I know this. There is a great deal of racism from black people towards white people, very much undeserved. This is so true.
And this is coming in from like social media, it's coming in from Hollywood, it's coming in from music, and it's coming in from politics. However, the people at the bottom end of the totem pole, terra firma, when you look at the protests and when you look at the social commentary on social media, black and white people, this is actually unifying people that are the working class blacks and the working class whites that are coming together because they can see, because they're the ones living in this community and they see through all of this now. So it's actually having a galvanizing effect in my estimation from what I've seen.
Right. Guys, thanks for all the comments. It's the chat is flowing really fast. So I obviously cannot answer and see every question or comment coming in. Michael Petek has an interesting question. If 70% of Pakistanis are inbred, how is it that they're such mighty jihad warriors? I mean, one has to be quite careful how you frame the question, how you perceive it when you answer it, and so on. When the U.S. Army does not allow people with an IQ lower than 84 to join the Army, I think 85 is the cutoff or something like that, because the lower that your IQ is, the less cognitive resources you have to reason with and to plan. Cultures that have low IQs do not do forward planning because they're incapable of dealing with those variables. They don't have the sufficient intellectual bandwidth to plan ahead, to look at all the variables, to work that out, right? And also, they're unable to deal with things emotionally. They tend to be far more aggressive. They are emotional. They respond with violence and aggression, with intimidation rather than reason, because again, they don't have the intellectual bandwidth to take an argument and assess it. So because they lack that capacity, because their IQ is too low, they become emotional and aggressive. So these people rely on intimidation, on violence, and of course, Islam feeds on that. Islam is very much appeals to that. Look at the appeal of Islam in prison with violent offenders, with the number of Islamic gangs that run the UK prisons. I mean, look at the stories Tommy Robinson will tell, for instance. So also look how India kicked Pakistan's ass recently. So there's also a lot of bluster, a lot of bravado. They're not necessarily great warriors in the sense of that they are a fine military fighting force and able to plan, and like the Romans were. They're just aggressive. They're brash. They're full of bravado. They are willing to be aggressive.
Can I just add on that, Lloyd, something as well? Well, one has to bear in mind that when you're looking at mighty jihad, when did mighty jihad actually last take place? You'll have to go back centuries before the inbreeding took place. So when you're looking at the expansion of, say, Islam from, say, the Arabian Peninsula, going up into, say, Iraq, Iran, and those were Zoroastrian Persians that weren't inbred, but already had a history of being a dominant world power. It's biblical history. They took over the Babylonians. So these were people that had already had a warlike cultural mentality, and they weren't inbred. So that's how the expansion took place with people that weren't inbred. As a product of being inbred, where has Islam expanded since? It hasn't. As Lloyd has brought out, it can't take on India. And look how many countries have tried to take on Israel.
Yep. No. So I mean, look, they've attacked Israel what 6 or 7 times. They've lost, and they bleat about it. So they've obviously also now turned to the propaganda warfare. After '67, the Russians themselves were embarrassed because they'd been funding, training, supplying the Arabs, and they lost. And of course, they realized they couldn't win militarily. So therefore, they employed something like 4,000 agents trained in propaganda, psychological warfare, and so on. And these people then started to craft stories. They started to craft the narratives that we have today. I mean, the whole charter of what was it, the Hamas charter, I think was originally, no, the PLO, sorry, was originally written in Moscow. So these movements were partnered with the communists. These are the enemies of the West, and they created them specifically to be a thorn in the side of the West. And unfortunately, they have been very successful. You go back to World War II, the Palestinians were literally Nazis. The political and religious leader of Palestine was literally a Nazi. So now you've got the Muslim Brotherhood, which has incubated hundreds of terror groups, and you've got the communist mix in there as well. And the West needs to really, at some point, as Thunderous said, call a spade, and call an enemy an enemy.
Yeah.
Thunderous?
Looks like UK judiciary has infiltrated with many lefty ideologies.
Yes. Yeah. And Oriana Fallaci, she predicted the clash of civilizations will be inevitable in Europe. Actually, let me find, I have actually something on that. Someone sent that to me today. Actually, I'll bring this up right now. So yeah, this is from Oriana Fallaci. Europe is no longer Europe. It is Arabia, a colony of Islam, where the Islamic invasion does not proceed in a physical sense, but also in a mental and cultural sense. So yes, this is true. The moment you give up your principles and your values, you are dead. Your culture is dead. Your civilization is dead. And a culture with no borders will cease to exist. So defend your borders, enforce your laws. And unfortunately, the way that I'm seeing it is that either we stand up for our culture, or we will be steamrolled. Either the police, either the judiciary, the government defends its borders and culture and people, because the social contract is the government must provide for the safety of its citizens. But if the government will not do that, the voters eventually will. And that is going to be, I think, a very sudden, very abrupt, very violent event when that happens, because I believe the UK, according to many political analysts, military analysts, people that I read and listen to, the UK is ready to erupt. And when that happens, it could become a chain reaction with consequences well beyond what anyone can control. Because I'll give you one example. These migrants have been violent. They've been successful. Like, for instance, when the police arrested the family that were abusing two boys, and they took these boys and they took them to the police station to hand them over to child protective services to put them in foster homes. These people protested. They were violent outside a police station, and eventually the boys were returned. You see, Muslims will protest, and people will be put out. Will be sent back to the community without being detained. Of course, if you are a UK native and you say something on Twitter, you'll go to jail for 3 years. But if you unalive someone with a machete, you might get 2 months of jail time and then probation and maybe community service, right? So there are these issues. But what's happened is now, look at what's happened in Epic. Violent protest, or at least protest, seems to have results. Street action has results. So now the Brits have realized we have to play this. We didn't make the rules, we just play the game. But now they're planning so many of these protests that these paid counter protesters, paid for by, you can see the back channel where the money comes through. They come through various groups, come through various organizations, come through unions and so on. So these are it's government funded in a certain sense. So these people have paid protesters, but if you have 80, 90, 100 protests, organic protests by English natives all over England, at some point the police don't have enough resources to manage all of these, and nor do the paid protesters, these groups, have enough protesters to go and counter-protest, because the native population is too big, and people are not. They've tried to suppress that instinct in people to defend themselves and their children, but they've messed with their children, and it's not going to go well. Your thoughts, Thunderous?
Yeah, the concern that I've got with what you're saying there is, interestingly, as a 57-year-old man that's lived through the 80s and 90s in the United Kingdom, we had tough guys in the 80s and 90s that were known from a certain particular generation within the community. As a 57-year-old man whose brother is a sensei of our town's largest martial arts dojo, I don't see the tough guys anymore. What I've seen now is that generation below. So if you're over the age of 45, you're probably too old to be involved in any kind of physical retaliation. I look at, say, people that are under the age of 45, say those in their 20s and 30s, and they don't have the mental or emotional skill sets to respond or take over or to replace the generation that was before them. I did see the Polish, because their community over the years hasn't been infiltrated with, say, immigration and policy, that the Polish community still have a strong, tight brotherhood. I know this because I've seen there are on certain YouTube channels underground fighting, and it's predominantly Polish men that are it's basically bare knuckle fighting with predominantly Polish men taking place. And I look at that and I think, there is no one in this country that would be doing that anymore, because that generation has passed, and they're too busy watching TikTok, they're too busy watching YouTube, they're too busy playing video games in the living room. That culture has gone. So when I do see people going out protesting or responding at these marches with immigrants, I don't see the younger generation. I see people of my generation doing it. I don't see anybody replacing us.
I think, though, that's a very smart move. I think people are wising up organically by seeing that, look, we are covered negatively in the media. So look at what they're doing with the protests in the UK now. They have women, grandmothers, right? Women exclusively, that will go and protest from say 10 a.m. until 2 p.m., right? It's exclusively women and children. So it'll be young children, 4 or 5 years old, with their grandmothers and mothers, and these women are wearing pink. There is no way, and these are from local people. So if a group of zombies from outside of town, funded by these NGOs and by these unions and so on, comes there, they are attacking grandmothers. The optics are very, very bad. And I think people have learned this. And when the news calls a bunch of grandmothers who are concerned about the safety of their young daughters and sons from being SA'd by foreigners, right? The media looks very bad. The media obviously looks disingenuous or false or propagandized or biased. So I think they're winning the optics war here, and they're forcing forcing a change in media coverage. They're forcing the Overton window, right, to move in their favor. And then what happens is people come by from 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock. Then they have a larger public protest where the men come along. And what they're doing is now, it's basically now becomes a weekly rallying point. So people are learning to have intelligent, smart protests, and they're learning very quickly. And I think this is something that is a long time coming, and it's shaping up very fast because people realize, I think there's an urgency. They have to adapt. Yep.
The difficulty is though with that they're going to hotels that have housed for migrants. But you and I discussed with one of the guests that's in the panel, forget what the lady's name is, where we were discussing how the government have now looking to give private landlords 5-year contracts to house migrants. So what will happen is they'll just disperse the because I think some of the comments that have come out in the media now, we're not using hotels anymore. You're not using. Well, you may not be using hotels anymore because you've now got the contracts prepared to go and give it to landlords, give them 5-year contracts. You'll have a regular maintenance program for the property. And at the end of the 5 years, you'll either renew the contract, which in my estimation, as somebody that works in mortgages.
But this is going to exacerbate the housing problem.
Exactly. That's where I was going to go.
This is going to cause a spiral. I don't see how this solves the problem. This worsens the problem.
Oh, this is good. Because, yeah, absolutely. Because what will happen is, for the landlord will look at this now, who was looking to get out of landlordism and sell their property because of the tax changes where the tax used to be on the net, but it's now on the gross. What will happen is the landlord will now look at this situation and think, well, if my current tenant is only paying £1,000 a month, as an example, I can look to break that contract and get an immigrant or maybe 2 immigrants in the house and maybe get £1,700 each. I then get somebody who routinely comes and monitors the property to pay all the bills like the gas, electricity and the council tax. I also then at the end of the 5 years have the house fully, or the property is fully refurbished, or I will probably get the contracts extended. When you look at the ratio of people, the growing population of the indigenous and the influx of immigration, the project of building houses is not as fast as the growing population from those two sectors. So the likelihood is that the landlord will have the contract extended. It's a win-win for the landlord.
But it's a lose for the native population.
It's a lose for the native. It's a loss for the native. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, Harry Tecklenburg, thank you very much for that donation. Thank you very, very much. Really do appreciate. Guys, if you enjoy what I discuss on the channel, I do know that I tend to venture into things that are controversial, uncomfortable topics. I do feel it's necessary, so I do appreciate the support, the engagement, and thank you. And Thunderous. This news item, we can wind down shortly, but people realize when it's let's say it's a native that committed a crime, his name, age, address, and everything about him gets published. Whereas if it's a foreigner, to use those terms, man is arrested, and Welsh choir boy is arrested. I mean, the Welsh choir boy had used a sharp object and he had punctured a young girl's, he used it 120 something times and tried to sever their neck. I mean, that is extreme. That is not just, there's a visceral hatred there. Now, this one man gets 5 years for stabbing girlfriend 258 times. Of course, you can tell from the headline it's a black man. And he not only took a selfie with the baby, he rolled the baby in the victim's blood. And so this is the kind of thing. And the guy basically got given a 2-week holiday to Jamaica, free accommodation, a cell phone, and got told to and given a puppy or something. I think that's what the judge did. Gave him a puppy to help him feel better, and then also probably gave him mandatory money for a female companionship rented by the hour to help him get over his loss. I think that's what the judiciary would have done here, because when you're a foreigner, you're not responsible for the things you do, right, Thunderous?
Well, this one, as sick as it is, there was one in America I was using last year where a man had raped a 9-year-old girl and a 6-year-old girl and was only given a prison sentence of 18 months. Whilst in this country, 5 men were arrested and given 30 years between them, so that's about 6 years each, because they were live streaming football at £10 per month. Live streaming football for £10 a month got these men 30 years between them, yet raping a 9-year-old girl and a 6-year-old girl only got 18, the man only got 18 months.
You know, the unfairness, obviously the government's coming down heavily with its boot to try to suppress dissent, but I think this just makes it worse. This just intensifies the feeling of unfairness and the pushback when it happens. This one, Pakistani authorities arrest 13 suspects of honor killing video. Here's a crazy idea. If you import millions of people from a population group that practices this as normal culture, you might start to have that exact same behavior.
We have done. We have done. There's many cases where fathers and mothers, fathers and sons over their own sisters. There was one where they put her in a suitcase. This is already taking place. The problem I have with this is that how much of it is not being released into the public sphere? How much is going on that we don't know about? Because there is no doubt that because the increase in immigration from this ideology will only result in the increase of this kind of law breaking.
Yeah. Honor crime, 11,000 UK cases recorded in 5 years. I believe the UK is now, if not the leading country in the world, at least the leading country in the West. We should have 0 of these crimes in our countries. But you've imported the third world, and unfortunately, you get the third world. When you import the culture, you get the culture. Honor-based offenses soared by 81% in the last 5 years. So yeah, this is. I don't have the very latest stats. I'm sure we can find them, but things are very, very bad. So 2,800 honor attacks in 2010, 2,800 in 2010. So yeah, things are not well. So Thunderous, I mean, I think we've covered this. Do you have anything positive that we can share? I mean, without going into all the negative stuff, we will know that this is a problem. It's people unhappy. What are your thoughts?
I think, if anything, when I look at these things, the only thing that keeps me sane or keeps my sanity are a couple of scriptures, Matthew 6:33 and Daniel 2:44. It's the only solution to what's going on in the world today. I don't think we're not going to go back to the world that we once had, and I think that's another problem for many people as well. If you look at, say, for those who live in the United Kingdom, if you look at your high street as it was, say, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years, you'll have seen a rapid decline in the type of shops that we had, the community spirit, the social cohesion, the number of pubs that we had, the number of nightclubs that we had, the number of snooker halls that we had, the number of areas where people could socially gather and do things. That has all diminished. So it's not just this influx of immigration that is creating a problem. People are also looking back retrospectively at the life that they once had and are being emotionally affected as well. Because even if you was to get rid of the immigration, as an example, the world is no longer going to go back to the world that you once had. It has changed forever. And everything that's going on in the world today, in my estimation, if you've got a problem with racism, money, immigration, injustice, so on and so forth, and Jesus himself said it, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, all these other things will be added to you. And then Daniel 2:44 makes it clear, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that never be brought to ruin. It will not be, the power will not be transferred to any other people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, and it will stand to times indefinite. The only hope we have for mankind is God's kingdom. That's the only positive
right.
we give.
Someone said earlier in the show that we've strayed from biblical principles. We've strayed from the Christian way, and this is the punishment. Now, I don't think that God arbitrarily punishes people,
No.
But it's like, look, to say that, oh, God punished you because you put your hand on the stove. I mean, maybe God told you don't put your hand on the stove, and then you did. God didn't punish you. That was the consequence of a poorly thought decision.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Look at the nation of Israel. the God of the Bible warned the nation of Israel time and again, if you abide by my laws, you will get blessings. But the moment that you detach or disconnect from my laws, then things are going to work out badly. It wasn't God doing the bad things. It was a byproduct of their actions by
Yes.
not upholding the law. That's what brought the problems. And if you go to Isaiah chapter 1, the God of the Bible says, come, let us set, he's appealing to them, come, let's set matters straight. And though your sins are crimson, I'll make them white like the blood of a lamb. He's appealing to the nation of Israel because they're so wayward. Even God himself said they're a stiff-necked people. So it's when you yourself move away, because what happens is, you're not applying Jeremiah 10:23. When you're not applying Jeremiah 10:23, these things will happen in your life.
Yeah. By the way, Ave Maria, check your messages. I did contact you recently. Yeah. Oh, so the couple of comments. Thank you very much, the Way of the Bereans, for that $20. Thank you. Says always doing your best to help folks like myself to defend against this demonic movement. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I try to talk about the ideology behind it, the psychology, the philosophy, the sources of these ideas, but also how they apply in current life. I do think, though, we're seeing people are learning from Napoleon very wisely said once that if you keep fighting the same enemy, he will learn your ways. And this is very true. And the problem is that evil is not always very creative. It tends to follow the same formula. And people are learning. And in the UK, change is happening. We're seeing it happen. Now, obviously, we don't hope that it goes to civil war, but there's a genuine likelihood of this. And however, people are learning, people are adapting. They are starting to use the media successfully. They are starting to shift the conversation. The idea of deportation and remigration is now being openly discussed, where before it was suppressed. So there are things we can do. So as long as we can speak about these things, it's because we speak about these things. This is why governments try to silence dissent. This is why they try to use all kinds of censorship. But just the fact of speaking allows others to realize they're not disconnected and alone, that others share their concerns, and they find that they can rally around these ideas with other people, with like-minded people, and they don't feel alone, they don't feel isolated, they don't feel weak, and they can come together. So this keeps that idea alive. It gives them hope. And I think it's just important to speak, and free speech is fundamental. And this allows the UK, those people who are still willing to speak, and the fact that there is still access to free speech, not saying it's under threat, it is under threat, to have found their rallying point. And people are learning from their enemies, and they are getting smarter. And I think they will succeed. I think they will pressure. Now, look, there will be pain. It will be difficult. Difficult choices must be made, but I think people are going to make it. Or at some point, you've got to say, you're a guest in my house, bloody well behave. They will force those others to abide by British culture, because if not, the culture is lost. Thunderous, back to you.
No, I think what you said there, I agree with Lloyd. As a final to everybody, I just want to thank them for tuning into the discussion that we've had this evening. Thank you very much, and I want to thank you, Lloyd, for yet again. I thought it was a good discussion tonight, and I thank you for inviting me.
No, really brilliant, Thunderous. I mean, some really powerful statements. I think there's reason to be optimistic. Sure, it's dark, but I think there's reason to be optimistic. We're seeing a shift. I think people are awake. I think people are aware. When I look at social media, you see people post something, Islam is peace, and like you'll see 5,000 comments going no, and they'll start quoting hadiths and quoting the Quran and talking about the history, and they'll go like, I mean, they get ratioed to pieces. We know more about this than the average Muslim, and people are pushing back. People are educated. You can't fool us all of the time. And I mean, man, they got to pay protesters. They don't have to pay us. We speak out for free. I mean, come on, man. Thunderous, last words.
No, I just want to thank you. As I say, just a reiteration. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you for everybody in the chat. And if Lloyd and myself have missed any of your questions, I would like to personally apologize because I've got a little bit of a tech issue here. But yeah, thank you, Lloyd.
Yeah, no. So thanks, guys. I hope this was educational. I hope you gained and learned something. I think we have reason to be positive. I think we should all just talk, learn the facts, speak, to our own circle. Maybe you can't change the world, but look, talk to the person in front of you. Maybe the person on the train next to you, on the bus. Maybe they just need that word of encouragement. And I think this is a knock-on effect. I think it's that little quiet communication that people bind around these things. Let them know that they are and you share part of the same fabric, part of the same culture, that you believe in the same values. And I think the values that we need to rally around are God, family, and country. I think God and family are critical. Country is critical. So remember that those are American values. Those are Superman's values, I am sure. And I think we just need to remember these basics. And I think we will ultimately be fine. It might be a difficult time, but I think the wheel can turn slowly, but it will turn. Thunderous, last word. And
Yeah, okay, then here's one last word. In response to what you've just said there about galvanizing, King David was on the battle lines with the nation of Israel versus the Philistines when Goliath came. Now, the Goliath made a comment, bring forth any one of your strong men. If he defeats Goliath, then we will be your slaves. The nation of Israel didn't do anything. Up came David. And as soon as David beat Goliath, a formidable foe for a little shepherd boy, that's when the nation of Israel galvanized and they took over the Philistines and succeeded in the victory. I think anybody has the ability to be a David and to galvanize. All you've got to do is just stand and be counted, and you'd be surprised the effect that standing and being counted can have.
I'd say yes. Yep. So guys, stand up, be counted, speak, use your voice. I think your voice is very powerful. So yeah, the lie cannot stand against the truth. Not forever. So guys, thank you very much. That's the end of it. And I really do appreciate all the support. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. It's going to be a busy week, so check the schedule. And yeah, Thunderous and I will be back to discuss more of these issues. So take care, guys. Thank you. And good night. God bless.